Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our show, Breaking Bread. Tonight, I'm your host, Justin Wright, and today we're cooking up one of my favorite dishes. I love seafood. Seafood reminds me of summer. It's been getting kind of hot lately. So tonight, we are going to cook up a delicious honey citrus shrimp dish. Tonight, we're just cooking our entree here within at least our home shop here. If you're at home cooking along, feel free to cook whatever other sides you'd like along with this dish. Couple housewarming things before we get started here. If you do want to interact and comment, you can comment below the video. That will show up here with me and I will see it and we'll be able to respond and we can have some communication there. Other than that, let's get started. So first we'll have a quick overview about what we're getting ourselves into tonight. Tyler?
So today we're talking about honey. And to go with this conversation, we're going to make a simple entree of a garlic honey lemon shrimp. This will go great with any sides of your choice. For us here at Harbor, we have chosen to place this entree with some sauteed onions and bell peppers along with some rice and black beans. So first we're going to mix our lemon juice and our honey, and we're going to go ahead and place that with our shrimp in their bowl so they can marinate for a little bit while we get the rest of our stuff set. Next, you're going to take your butter and you're going to place that in your pan. That should be hot by this point. That way we get our butter nice and melted. You can add in a pinch of salt right now if you'd like. If not, you can do that to taste later. And then after our butter has melted, we'll add our garlic. We'll gently saute our garlic for a little bit until it's nice and golden brown and caramelized. And then we'll go ahead and add our shrimp and let our shrimp finish cooking. And what we'll end up with is a very nice plate of some honey lemon garlic shrimp. Mmm, tasty.
All right, so let's get started, shall we? First things first, let's set our burners on. I like to set these to, for now, let's just do a low medium. Get that warming up while we start to mix our other ingredients. So our star of the show tonight is going to be honey. Even though we are cooking shrimp, our main topic tonight is going to be about bees. And we were blessed to have this whole episode partially sponsored by Lucky Bees. He is a local bee removal agency who will come in and relocate your bees for you instead of exterminating them if you happen to have them come upon the property. We had a bit of an issue with bees here at the church a couple weeks back, and he was great. He came out and took them out for us and moved them to another hive around town somewhere. So later on, when we finish cooking our meal, we'll get to watch an interview that we did with him last week, and it's phenomenal and packed full of information. So to start with our cooking, we're going to take our 2 lemons and we're going to chop these in half first. And you could measure this if you really wanted to. I'm not going to at the moment. I found 2 lemons was about perfect for the amount of juice we need. So we're just going to squeeze these into our bowl here. It's alright if the seeds fall in. You can take them out if you want, if it bothers you. I don't really mind having the seeds in there, so I'm going to leave these in for now. Alright. I think I got one more half here. Here we go. And once that is done, you can go ahead and remove your lemon peels. And then next we're going to add in a little bit of soy sauce, just a touch, and we're going to add in some cayenne pepper. Oh yeah, JJ the wedding planner definitely made my mouth water. Makes me salivate every time I smell the lemons. I'm going to add a bit of cayenne pepper into this. I like things spicy. You do whatever you like at home. Doesn't have to be spicy. I just enjoy the heat. We're going to give this a bit of a stir. Now this will be quite tart and maybe a bit salty. We don't have our honey in yet. I know in our montage video we added the honey in along with our lemon juice, but we actually learned from Silas, our beekeeper we've been in touch with, that heating up honey past 161 degrees Fahrenheit is considered pasteurization, and that actually takes out and kills all of the good enzymes and pollens and things that are in the honey that are actually beneficial for us to consume. So we're going to mix in our honey at the end of this dish tonight. Alright, so next we're going to get our garlic going. So we need to cut some butter up. I use about a tablespoon, maybe 2. And we're just going to take this and plop this in our nice warm pan. Let that simmer. And then next I'm going to take a couple pinches of garlic. Our recipe I believe called for 5 cloves. If you don't like a ton of garlic, that's fine. I love garlic, so we're going to use most of this. We'll turn our pan down a bit here. Let's add in some garlic. right. Once that's there, we're going to gently stir this so we start getting a browning going on. We want our garlic nice and caramelized before we add our next ingredients. If your pan's a bit hot like mine is, you can remove it from the heat. We can turn this down a little bit more, let that cool. So the caramelization actually helps bring out sweetness in the sugars that's in the garlic and helps add quite a bit of depth to flavor. As many of you probably know in your own experience in life, raw garlic is not a pleasant thing to eat. So I don't recommend doing this without cooking your garlic a bit. Alright, once that is in there, we are going to go ahead and we're going to take our shrimp that we have here. These should be roughly room temperature, raw and peeled. And we're going to add them into our sauce that we made here. All right. And we're going to make sure we get most of these nice and coated. You can use a fork, a spoon. I'm going to use my hands. Cooking gets a little dirty, that's okay. Go ahead and mix that up, get our shrimp nice and coated. And it's okay if it seems like there's a lot of liquid. This will actually help us simmer down the garlic and the butter in the pan. So now let's go ahead and add this to our pan. We're going to turn our heat back up to medium and gently stir this. And as you can see, the shrimp will begin to turn from their translucent bluish color to that wonderful orange color we all know and love in our seafood. All right. So as that starts to heat up a little bit, we'll let this simmer for a moment. We can continue our conversation with honey. So a handful of things that I actually recently learned that I did not know about. I always kind of assumed honey is honey. You buy it in a jar at the store. If you're buying it at Vons, it costs X amount. If you buy it at Whole Foods, it's probably going to cost you a bit more. I kind of figured, oh, it's all the same stuff, right? It's kind of like syrup. Well, I was very, very wrong. And learned that honey is actually not that much similar to syrup at all. It's actually made with the nectar from different plants, specifically plants that flower. And the bees actually have a second stomach that they use to process that nectar with enzymes that then helps bring out some of the sugars and other vital minerals and things that the bees need. They take that back to their hive. It is then regurgitated into the honeycomb cells, and they actually do a bit of a dance with their wings to evaporate water out of the honey so we get that thick, delicious consistency that we all know and love. Back to our shrimp a bit as this simmers. Keep tossing this around. We're going to turn ours up a bit more here. I'm going to go ahead and add in a pinch or two of salt as this keeps cooking. You can salt to taste. I'm just going to use about 2 pinches. Seems about right here. That should be good. And I'm actually going to add another couple sprigs of some cayenne pepper. And let's mix that in a bit. Alright, there we go. This is starting to cook up nicely. I don't know about you guys, but it smells good in here. I can smell the garlic mixed with the citrus. It's just delightful. Alright, we're going to try to turn most of these over here so we get a nice even cook. Alright, do we have any comments? Oh, look at that, we have one. I tried Lucky's honey. It was so much better than any other honey I've ever had. I would have to agree with Tyler on that one. I don't think before, actually yesterday, I had ever had true raw honey. Silas actually gets this directly from the hives that he rescues, and he scrapes off the honeycombs, and the honey pours out. It basically goes into a 5-gallon bucket, and he takes a mesh filter of sorts and kind of mashes the whole waxy honey mixture through this filter to get a lot of the large particulates out. I'm not sure how many times he does that, but if you look at our honey here, I'll come give a close up. It's quite clear. You can almost see through, it's almost opaque, but it is delicious. And it has quite a unique flavor. This one here is a white sage honey. This one on our left is, I believe, a lavender honey, and the one on the right is I believe it was a Kauai Lakii flower, which I believe is from Hawaii. All these 3 honeys have a distinctly different flavor, and they even have a different texture and mouthfeel, which, you know, most stuff honey you buy at the store, it all seems the same, it all tastes the same. These each have a drastically different flavor profile, which is quite fascinating. So back to our shrimp. It's looking pretty good as it cooks over here. I'm gonna let this simmer for a bit longer, get some of that lemon juice cooked down a bit. And then you can dump this straight into a bowl. If you want this only simply coated with the honey after it's cooked in this, you can use some tongs or a strainer to take them out. I'm actually going to use a set of tongs that we have here. Oh, I heard I missed a comment.
One of our viewers said, I like raw garlic, it's spicy, and this is a response.
Ew, Lauren. Raw garlic is very spicy. If you enjoy it, that's on you. If you eat enough of it, it'll make your sweat smell bad too. So that's something to keep in mind for all of you garlic lovers out there. Alright, so let's turn these one more time. These are looking about done. You want your shrimp to be opaque in color. You want them to turn nice orange and white. You don't want the white on the top ends of the meat to be translucent. If it's translucent, it's not done. You want to be also careful about overcooking. If you overcook shrimp, it does tend to get quite leathery. And I think we are about good here on our end. So I'm going to turn our heat down to low and get a bowl and start moving this over. Alright, and as we're doing this, if you do want the rest of that garlic in with your shrimp, go ahead and grab a spoon and we can just scrape that out of our pan and into our bowl here. What I love about cooking with citrus is the sweetness that comes out within the juices from the different fruits as it cooks. I find lemon and orange actually form 2 fairly distinct flavors if you cook them thoroughly enough. That should be about good. We're going to turn our heat off down here. Go ahead and place your dirty spoon elsewhere. And for this next part, we are going to add a few of these shrimps to our small bowl here. We'll do about half of these at a time so that we can evenly coat these in some of our delicious raw honey that we have here. The recipe, I believe, called for about 2 tablespoons of honey. You can do this to taste. I'm not going to perfectly measure it. I'm just going to use basically a small teaspoon. And we're going to go with let's go with the white sage honey for this tonight. We'll see how this matches up with our lemon shrimp. And this stuff is just delicious. The top is a bit white, as you can see here. That's actually simply from all of the air bubbles that are in the honey that rise to the top as it sits. We're going to take a couple scoops of this out. And one other thing that's to note with raw honey is I have found this stuff to be a lot more viscous and thick than typically the stuff we buy off the shelves. And a note on that, around the world, this is quite regulated in the United States, but honey is occasionally cut with stuff like cornstarch and corn syrup or water to either make it thicker or to make it a bit thinner if needed, and it helps from a business standpoint, allows the product to stretch farther on the shelf. Unfortunately, that means those of you who are buying it at home, depending on where you are, might not be getting actual pure honey. So now that that's added in, we're going to just gently toss our shrimp. Our shrimp should still be a bit warm, so the honey should nicely glaze the outside of our shrimp. And then once this set of shrimp are done, we can go ahead and place these on a plate. And then we'll mix our second batch here. All right. I like to keep my kitchen tidy as I go if I can. It makes the end of the evening much easier for all participants involved. Of course, you don't have to follow along with that with me, but I like keeping things in order here. So we're going to use a new spoon for our honey. We have a question. Simple recipe tonight. I love how quickly you can make this. Yes, shrimp is one of the wonderful foods that we can eat, that we can buy from the grocery store, that cooks up in minutes. If you need a quick night, need some protein, pasta and shrimp is delicious. You could do you could honestly put this on a plate of pasta with some garlic and maybe try some rosemary and a bit of olive oil. That would be delicious. It's quick, easy, it tastes great, it's packed full of protein, and it's relatively inexpensive. So we're going to go ahead and add another tablespoon or so onto our second batch of shrimp. And when we're done mixing this up here, if you all want to eat this now, you can plate your shrimp on your food with whatever other appetizers you have going along, or any sides for this dish. And we actually are going to do a viewing of the interview that we got to participate in with Silas the beekeeper last week. So Tyler, whenever you're ready with that, we can move on over. All right. So, first of all, it's nice to finally meet you. I know you've been in contact with Tyler and Sadie and coming to take care of the bees on our campus here. But my name's Justin. I'm our host for Breaking Bread, the cooking show that we have. And this month's theme was about honey. And so our timeliness with the bees on campus and you coming and helping us out was pretty much couldn't have been better. If you could give us your name, what you do, your company?
Yeah, I mean, I go by Lucky. My company is Lucky Bees, but my name is Silas, last name McClellan. What I do is I save bees. I relocate them and save them instead of killing them, so they can continue to do what they do best.
I had a couple of questions in general, just with bees and beekeeping as a whole. But first of all, I wanted to ask, what got you into the hobby?
So I had a friend that she had some beehives, and one day she's like, "I'm gonna go check my beehives," and I'm like, "That sounds cool. I want to go check that out." And I went with her. And so this girl, she does bees. She doesn't wear a suit or a veil. She does it like just wearing regular clothes, barehanded. You get stung. She would cry sometimes when she gets stung, but so that's how I actually got introduced to bees, without a bee suit, without, she is a smoker, and she, if the bees were real aggressive, she did have something to cover her face, but oftentimes she would without it. This is my friend Mariah in Hawaii. So she introduced me to bees, and I fell in love with the bees and just started doing it. And I got my own hives, and yeah, it's been like 6 years now since that moment.
So from a standard day of work, for you relocating hives, it's a bit of a two-in-one question here. One, what was your experience like on our campus moving our hive that we had in one of our buildings here? And along with that, what do you see the role of hive relocation within like an urbanized environment? Like you said, some of these hives end up going up to Bakersfield, and they're used for pollination and continuing the agriculture cycles and things. But within our urban setting here, where do you see the place in, or the usefulness within your industry in beekeeping?
So yeah, that's a great question. And basically, bees are needed even if you don't have a huge 300-acre almond orchard in our backyards. I mean, all of Orange County used to be orange orchards.
Right.
Each individual little quarter-acre, each individual little lot, all your neighbors, all your friends, they have orange trees or a lemon tree, or whatever it is that whatever fruit, peach, apples. And every single one of those fruits, if a bee doesn't visit that spot, you're not going to have a fruit on it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's critical for backyard beekeepers to have places in rural areas where bees are still allowed to be, instead of it being like, oh, we don't want bees, we're going to pest control every single one that we see. And eventually in rural areas, there would be no bees. So I think it's important for backyard beekeepers, enthusiasts, people that want to have a few hives in their backyard, pull honey out. It's nothing like going to your own backyard and pulling a chunk of raw honeycomb out of your own backyard. You know what I mean? You don't have to have a huge farm. You can have 3 or 4 hives and a couple of fruit trees, and you can pull some good honey out of that. And just depends, The question about what it was like to remove bees out of the church, it was a little bit more of a complicated one because it was an overhang. It's kind of like doing an interior removal as if it was on a ceiling. Okay. Because it was an overhang, so it adds a little bit of difficulty to it. So I had to cut open that ceiling to be able to get to it, and then as you cut the comb, the honey drips all over you. So instead of it like me doing it at an angle where I can go right here and pull each piece off gently, you have to do it a little bit. You have to be a little more rough. You got to do it a little bit quickly, because if you cut it the wrong spot and a bunch of honey pours on you, you got to be able to pull that comb down before it just drips everywhere, Mm-hmm. So it's a bit messy. It was a bit messy of a job, but nonetheless, it was another fun one. I got those bees into a box. I went and checked that box the other day, actually, and I'm not sure if the queen made the trip. Uh-huh. So I'll have to re-queen that hive. I did a different removal where there was a bunch of queen cells. And I added a bunch of queen cells to different hives, including that one. So hopefully that a queen will be born in that box, and then call those hers,
Mm-hmm. But besides
maybe not besides, but with the production of honey, right? And like you mentioned, depending on the flowers that the bees are visiting, you get different variabilities within the honey. What general benefits do you think you know of that honey and bees can actually provide for us as people within our local ecologies and economies?
So the bottom line when it comes to honey and its health benefits is when you know, a lot of the honey you see in the stores is pasteurized, is microfiltration stuff. So they pull all the enzymes and all the stuff that's actually healthy for you out of it, so it will maintain its liquid state. All raw honey will crystallize within 6 to a year and turn into a big sugary, grainy mess. But if you put it in warm water, it will become a liquid again. Mm-hmm. And I say warm water because anything above 160 degrees, which is pasteurization, right? I think it's 160. I'm not sure. 160 degrees is to pasteurize. So anything above that will start to kill the enzymes inside of honey, and then you lose a lot of the benefits of honey. So cooking, when it comes to honey and cooking, I recommend whatever food you're putting on, whatever you're doing with it, do the heat source, do everything that, and then at the end, put a little bit of honey on it, so it maintains the enzymes on it. Especially if you're using raw honey from a local source, you know.
Right. With flavors of honey, like, do you notice if you have bees that are typically in an apple orchard or an almond orchard or an orange orchard, does it actually pull the flavor of the plants or the trees that they're pollinating, or is it more, or the pollen's not so much flavored by the plants that they come off of, if that makes sense?
So the pollen for honeybees is their protein source. That's their protein. Mm-hmm. The nectar, which is so a bee visits a flower and uses proboscis, which is like a long nose, like straw that goes inside of the flower and sucks nectar out of it. Have you ever taken those little red flowers? I think it's succulents. There's little red flowers and you can pull it off and they have like a nectar at the end of it.
Yeah.
So that's all flowers have that. Bees just have the what's called a proboscis to reach that nectar, and they suck that sugary nectar out. They have two different stomachs. So one stomach is their honey storage tank, and the other stomach is their digestive system. So they fly to a flower, put that nectar in there, fly back to the hive. They actually regurgitate that honey, but it's not from their like digestive stomach. It's from a honey stomach to another bee, and then it goes to another bee. And each time it passes from one bee to another bee, a little bit more of that enzyme is added, and that enzyme is what makes it honey, really. And that it's coming from all these different floral sources. So yeah, and then eventually it ends up in a cell, and the bees, they fan out all the water, so then you're left with honey. And the flavor is definitely a lot of different flavors depending on where those bees pull that what flower they're you know. It just depends on the flower. You know, if you're in Hawaii and you get if you go out to Hilo side or Puna side, it's a lot of ohia. So ohia crystallizes all white, and it crystallizes fastly. Same thing with kiave, clover. There's different types of honey that actually crystallize white. So it's not just the flavor, but the color of the honey is very different throughout the world, throughout the country, throughout the state, everywhere. It just depends on what floral source those bees are reaching. The flavor is, you know, if you had bees in an apple orchard and it was a monoculture and that's all they had to be able to eat, the honey would not taste like an apple. Well, honey. And there's no way for me to describe that to you other than if I had some apple honey for you to taste. Right. It doesn't taste like apple, but it tastes like apple honey. You know, it's different. It's different than an apple flavor, but it's like, oh, that's apple honey. You know, for me as a beekeeper, I'm like, oh, that's what that is. You know, so. Honey has a lot of benefits. You know, if you read about apitherapy, which I've gotten into myself, it's not just the honey or the wax. It's also bee venom. Bee venom is really good for back pain. I actually use bee venom for my own pain. I have some low back stuff I'm also a massage therapist by trade. I did massage work from 2002 to 2018. And I use, just the bone grinding work of working on people all day long, it takes a toll on you. So I started using bee venom on my spine, and it really takes the edge off that pain. It really can make the pain almost go away for a little while.
Wow. Yeah, I would not have expected that from bee venom. That's actually pretty awesome. That's really cool.
It's good for infections too. Like people that hit a certain stage with, especially Lyme disease, antibiotics and stuff like that have only so much effect, but a lot of people are going to bee venom for chronic Lyme disease problems. It's helping a lot of people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, well, our last question here. If there was one or two things you wish the public knew more about with bees, what would you like to say?
That's a great question, and I would like to ponder on that for a while before I just like verbally explode on it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that I would want people to understand a little more.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the main thing that I would want people to understand is that, especially when it comes to swarms, when a swarm lands in a tree or a swarm lands on your property, that they're not looking to be aggressive or to sting you. It is don't get me wrong, it is a hazard, especially if they're Africanized. Mm-hmm. But most bees aren't. Most bees aren't Africanized. Most bees, especially when they're in the swarm phase, they have no honey, they have no baby bees to protect. So they're not really gonna hurt you or your animals or anything. You can give it a little bit of time and call a beekeeper instead of like being like, oh my God, quick, kill them, get rid of them. There's a time period that before they even have anything to defend, which is honey and new bees. They're just trying to find a new home. So if people would understand that they're not really that aggressive and that they don't need to be scared of them, then maybe I would get that call before some pest control company would.
Our big premise with the cooking show we've got here is really, how do we reconnect ourselves with our communities and our environment, right? And there's so many things we eat that we don't really know where they come from. I think honey is one of those great things that it's a great doorway into these conversations and starting an understanding of, hey, our environment's so vital to the health of our food and our individual selves, where we then can go and be of benefit to our communities. So thank you. This was awesome, and I can't wait for our further conversations. This is going to be good.
All right, welcome back. I hope you guys all found that as entertaining and interesting and informative as I did. I learned so much talking with Silas the other day, and it was so fascinating to me because this is a topic that I've been interested in for a while but have never really delved into. So he was a great entry point for me to really see, kind of lift under the covers, so to speak, and see what goes on in the bee world. So a couple things for a bit of a discussion as we move on here. Oh, I see that Matt is watching tonight. Hi, Matt. I'm so glad that you could make it. I really hope you're enjoying it, and I hope it's been informative, and I hope you're going to learn something new, if you haven't already, as much as I've learned something new about every time I've looked any of this stuff up to find information. It's always new to me. So bees, we all understand how important bees are for the most part, right? There was a big push maybe 10 years ago about how the bees are dying. And how there's a problem with the bees and we need to save the bees. That's partially true. The bees are actually on the rise right now because of people, thankfully, like Silas, who go and relocate a lot of those hives around different areas within their regions. Do we have another question? Oh yes, I remember that was a trend, at least for my young self. I was in probably middle school when all the young ladies were walking around trying to make their lips puffy with bee venom. Can't imagine that was a pleasant experience, but to all of you who are adults now, I hope it was worth it. But yeah, I think that's wild that bee venom can actually be used for medicinal purposes. I know Silas had mentioned he actually used it to help deal with back pain. I haven't looked into why that is yet, but that is the next step for me down the Google rabbit hole of how bee venom can actually benefit us, even though it typically causes discomfort. The Back to our bees. So bees bees have an extremely important role in our local ecology and the ecology of the entire planet, and actually the survival of a majority of our planet. They are the mediator between, for the most part, between male and female flowers on pretty much every plant imaginable. There's a couple plants that are able to reproduce on their own effectively, but that's not very common. And for us humans, we actually have about 80% of all the produce we consume, whether that be cherries, oranges, all types of citrus, apples, a lot of nuts like almonds, I believe peas and beans and garlic and beets, and pretty much 80% of the grocery store that you walk into will only have food there on the shelves because of bees. I see we have another comment from Nan. We've had to call a beekeeper twice to remove their nest. Yeah, they can be pesky. I had a couple of hives on when I was a child in San Diego. We had a couple of hives that like to nest on our deck each summer, and so we'd call the beekeepers to come remove them. The first one, I believe we actually unfortunately did call an exterminator, and they actually killed the hive. But the other two, I believe, if my memory serves me right, we actually had someone come remove the bees, and they actually cleaned the honeycombs in our kitchen and strained the honey out into jars for us while we were there, which was really cool to actually, as a kid, it was cool to see. It makes quite a mess. It was exciting. Yeah, our grocery stores. So most of that food wouldn't actually be there. And that is simply because bees do the wonderful job of, when they fly into their little flowers, all the little furs and points on their bodies collect this pollen, as I believe Silas also described. And although they're mainly there for the nectar, right, because they eat, the honey's actually food for the bees, they happen to also then take that pollen and take it to other flowers, which then enables the plants to more quickly reproduce than a plant that was evolutionally designed to have wind be the pollinating force. Now, there are lots of plants that are pollinated by the wind, but you get a much less density of pollen moving through the air than you do with bees, and your chance of reproduction is much lower than with a bee going from flower to flower. And flowers, in some miraculous way, in a sense, kind of figured out, so to speak, that bees were very beneficial to them. So they started growing brighter colored flowers. They started growing flowers that secreted more aromas, so they smelled better and were more attractive to bees. It wasn't so much, of course, that the plants are thinking and the plant one day woke up and it's like, oh, it's Sunday morning and I really want to be pollinated today. It was more so that the plants that were more colorful, more vibrant, more enticing to the bees just tended to outcompete other flora. And that is, I think that's a pretty insanely miraculous thing, that an organic organism as the bee, right, they're all individuals, but they work together in a hive when they're in their hives. And then as a collective, although they're only trying to do things individually, they benefit the entire ecosystem of the world, including us. And a bit of a fun fact that goes along with our pollination here. According to the USDA, that is, I believe is the United States Department of Agriculture, 80% of our food in plant-based industrial products require pollination by animals. An important note, bees are not the only pollinators. Hummingbirds pollinate flowers that they visit. Wasps are pollinators. Many insects are pollinators. Some animals are even pollinators. Like with a pine tree, right? In the summertime and spring, like we have some pine trees around here, and in my neighborhood we have a bunch of them, and when the wind blows or the squirrels go rustling up the side of the trees, it knocks a bunch of pollen everywhere and makes a mess. But pollinators are important, and not just the bees, although, like, obviously this episode is about them, so they are gravely important, but they're not the only ones. And in the United States alone, the pollination of agricultural crops in just our country is valued at $10 billion annually. Globally, it is responsible for an estimate of over $3 trillion a year. Now, that kind of makes sense. Food is our number one consumed resource in the world. We need it, obviously. But that is crazy to me that so much of our economy even is reliant on bees doing their thing. And unfortunately, we're human beings, and human beings do a fantastic job at messing things up that don't need to be messed up. We're also really great at fixing some of those things too, but that is an adverse side effect of just us as people and civilization, is that we take over land, and because of that we are destroying the ecosystems that these bees need to survive. And one of the main things that is causing problems is massive agriculture. Now, that is usually very helpful, like with, say, an apple orchard, right? You have a monocrop that you could have dozens of bee swarms that just use this whole crop, and that's how they, get their honey, and they're fed, and it takes care of all the apples. But unfortunately, to keep the crops alive and healthy, the food crops, our farmers have to use pesticides, and they have their place, and they're important, and they're extremely useful, because otherwise, we'd have much less food actually to feed the world with. But the collateral damage of these pesticides, although it kills a lot of the vermin that eat and feed off of the crops, it also affects our bees, and it kills them just like it kills any other insect. And there is not really a huge way to reverse that right now. Just the way we farm and the way our ag system is set up, it's going to take a while to really make some large changes in that. But there are some very simple things that we can all do at home, in our backyards, in our communities, to make sure that bees have a fighting chance, and that for our future generations, we have the great pollinators of the world, so that our whole selves can continue to evolve and grow, and our generations to come can have a future of delicious food like an apple. But some of those things that we can do at home, they're simple. It takes a little bit of time, but they're simple. Number one, I think the easiest one, don't call a bee exterminator. Call a bee relocator. We will get the number out for Lucky Bees here. I will read it to you off of one of our delicious jars of honey we got from him. His number is 714-264-7733. Again, that was 714-264-7733. And he's local. He's just down the street from us here. So if any of you at home need a problem with bees, or a solution rather to a bee problem, you can go ahead and give him a call. So that's our first thing. I think it's the easiest, it's the quickest, it's a no-brainer in my book. The second thing that we can do is paying attention to what is around us with our local flora and fauna, or the local plants surrounding our homes within our greater environments. And this, for me, if you have a piece of land in Costa Mesa, or really anywhere in Southern California, it's a piece of cake. Just plant some flowers. Lauren says, do bees have favorite flowers? I'm not sure about favorite. I'm sure they do have their preferences. But they will go towards what is lucrative for them. So if you happen to find a couple flowers in your garden that a lot of bees like, or you happen to find bees around those flowers more often, maybe plant more of those in your yard. And that's exactly my point. Go online to the Orange, I believe it's the pull in the blank here, we can post it later, but the Orange County City website and their Department of Ag, and there are lists upon lists of local flora that you can plant in your backyard that grows great in the clay soil we have here that's terrible for most other things. And by simply just replanting the local flora that we have dug up for our roads and driveways and our lawns and everything, we're providing food and resources for all these pollinators to come back, so they want to stay here, so they can stay here, and so that they can thrive. Unfortunately, a lot of people are also terrified of bees, and that doesn't help, because if you have little kids, it can be a problem if the kids go trampling through a beehive somewhere. It's not going to be a happy camper. And of course, like some people, I have a couple in my family that are allergic to bees. It's not a good thing to want to have a lot of bees around your home if you are in one of those two situations. But if not, a couple pots of flower on the front porch, plant a flower bed in your backyard, if you have a space, say you have some citrus trees at home in your yard or your front yard, if you can, maybe take up some of that grass and plant a packet of local flowers that will fill in beneath your trees. Those are all some really simple things that we can all work together on to help save them and help give them a home that they can thrive in. And that's about it for me on our pollinators. I did want to get a little bit into honey. That's right here, delicious. So Silas actually sells these jars. He was wonderfully kind and donated a couple extra for us to use here at the church and to have a sample here. If you want some honey that is made from bees in your local backyard, with the flowers you see along the road, with the flowers all over the Newport Bay that we have here next to the church, you can give him a call, ask him what he has on hand, if he has any, when he'll have it available. You can also look up any other local farmers markets. They typically have local beekeepers that will come and bring their honey. And that's a great way to put our blessed resources back into our local economy and helping out our fellow kin who are doing their best to take care of our planet and reconnect themselves with nature and hopefully with our communities. So that's about it. That's a wrap for tonight. We will continue this year. I know we took a break in February. We're continuing this year with our themes surrounding how our food is made and impacted within our environment and within our peoples and our communities. So stay tuned. We have a whole year planned out of episodes ranging from coffee and tea and talking about caffeine and the history and culture behind the movement of coffee in the world and the coffee trade. We'll have an episode on curing meats. So what's a useful way that we can use a whole animal, right? And then so we're not wasting anything. And say you have some meat in your fridge and it sits too long. Oh, it's gone bad. Well, we'll have some tips for how you can increase the longevity of your meats at home. And we'll also be talking a bit about almonds and nuts and how useful and nutrients-packed those little bite-sized snacks can be. And we'll even be talking a bit about fungus and how decomposition can actually be the fertile bed grounds for everything that we like to enjoy in this world. So I hope you guys had a great time tonight. I hope we had some fun. I sure had a great time being your host tonight. Thank you all who came to watch. And if you want to join us next week, I believe, I might have the date wrong. I think the last Wednesday of next month is the 26th. Let me check here. Give me 1 second. Will I pull up a calendar? All right, the 28th. So next Wednesday, the 28th, come on in, and we're going to be talking about eggs. Eggs are a wonderful source of protein. They're delicious, and we're going to break some culinary rules and have breakfast for dinner. We're going to be making some breakfast egg tacos. So don't normally have eggs for dinner. Don't normally see eggs in tacos very much, and we're having breakfast for dinner. What's better than that? So thank you guys